is not present and that we have one vacancy on the commission. So those of you that may be listening, this is an opportunity. If you would like to serve on the planning commission, we have a vacancy and you can come down to City Hall and fill out an application form. There you go. I'm sure we'll have dozens of applicants.
Right now.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. Is there anything to add or change with the agenda, or can we just adopt the agenda as presented? Think.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the agenda as presented. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda is adopted. Just one comment too with the minutes. You know, the special meeting we had with One Roof Housing regarding their final plat was going to come to the city council, and that has been delayed at their request to make sure that they have all that information that we had requested.
Yeah.
They're going to be coming to the council next week, right?
Potentially.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah, I don't think we're sure about that yet.
Okay. So, we have minutes from those, the last two meetings, the July 5th regular meeting and the July 13th special meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, is there a motion to approve?
We approve. Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes of both the July 5th and the July 13th meetings as presented. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have one public hearing, one request before us today, and that's the request by John and Joanne Holiska for a conditional use permit to expand and modify their existing non-conforming property in the downtown core waterfront zone. They propose to add additions to the foundation on the north, west, and south sides of the structure and remove and replace the structure as indicated in the attached plans. And we have what I would say is a fairly detailed application which gives us all of that information.
I don't know if one second. Tina, do you have any extra paper versions? I don't like scrolling on it. If I can do this,
Yeah,
but
no.
if you have extra ones, thanks.
Do you want one? Michael, you got one?
I got one, thank you.
Okay.
I'm tired of scrolling on this thing.
Yeah, it's hard sometimes, so.
Yeah.
Mike, do you have anything you want to add to this?
Nope.
John, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, just, I don't know everybody here, and I don't know if everybody, obviously I know Mike quite well, on this subject in particular, and yourself. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is John Holiska. Along with my wife, have the property just on the other side of Sydney's, which is 16 South Broadway. It's been a residential property since the structure was moved from across the road. It had previously been located on the harbor itself and used as an office, but it's been in continuous residential use since the early 1960s at least. It was previously owned by Hal Greenwood, who's a member of this commission, and I think who everybody in the city knows. And so we purchased it in 2003 as a residential property and have continued to occupy it as such. And what we want to do is we want to continue to live in our house as residential occupants, and we want to be able to do so on the first floor. And we want to be able to make modest expansion as Tim described there in the plans that we've submitted. And basically we want to get rid of our flat roof because it's an issue of leakage, which is pretty typical of the type of structure. We want to put in new modern windows, etc. We want to make it energy efficient. And we want to do these things without being classified as commercial, because if we were commercial, that means that we either have to restrict our occupancy to the second floor, or we have to move out every 30 days if we were commercial and declared ourselves as being a lodging. And so all of those are impractical in terms of a regular residential use. And so we want to do so consistent with all the city ordinances. In other words, we don't want to kind of cut corners or shade things. We want everything on the up and up. So the essence of our application is for a conditional use as the city ordinances provide as an R1, the equivalency of an R1. And so we respectfully ask that you hear that application, and obviously we would hope that you would approve it. And be happy to answer any questions whatsoever. And along here with me is actually my brother Tom, who is my attorney.
Hey.
So, and here's my neighbor Bruce, so everybody knows. So, excuse me. At any rate.
Okay, thank you,
If
thank
there are
you.
any questions, I'd be very happy to answer anything.
Okay, thank you, John. Are there any questions that the commission members have, or we're ready to open it up to public comment? This is a public hearing, so.
Yeah.
Okay, if we have no questions at this point, anybody that has any, wants to make a public statement regarding the request, this is the public hearing.
I missed the, I'm sorry, I'm late. I missed the, what's the project? What do you want to do? And just, can you sum it up for me?
Sure. We want to make, as I described to you in the past, we want to make a modest expansion on the main floor and
Yeah.
occupy the property as a residence as we have since,
Yeah.
what, 2003?
Yeah.
So the
Basically, and not
request-
have to live in it as a commercial building, which means you can only stay there for,
Right.
well, you can only occupy on the second floor.
Yeah.
Or if it's lodging, only live in that for a continuous 30-day period, and then you have to vacate. Can move back in right away, but that's sort of impractical. So that's what we want to do. So as we do,
Thanks.
So the request is for a conditional use permit.
conditional use permit.
To remove the existing home and place a new home on that property, slightly enlarging.
Is it a request to remove the
footprint.
home? It seems to be a request to
Yes.
either remove the home or to recondition the one that's there. That's what I read.
I've read this as it's a request to remove and replace the structure that, I mean, this is what's stated here. Remove and replace the structure.
There's quite a history of
But we have drawings of additions.
conversation about this.
We have drawing of an addition.
The additions are that area outside of the footprint of the existing structure. This structure is not.
So there's no
The proposed-
request
the
in here.
proposed
I thought, I read language in one of these letters that just said you wanted to keep your options open on whether you were restoring or building.
Yeah, that's what I
Can I
read.
speak again?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We reached an agreement last year with Lonnie Dupree to remove the structure and rebuild a log-type structure similar to his rental that he has across the street from the library, which is a face log, Scandinavian-style small structure. We got to the point where Lonnie walked in to apply for a building permit, and Mike had interpreted the ordinance to say that if we did so, we would lose our non-conforming residential use. And so everything stopped at that point. We entered into negotiations and exchanges of communication with the city by way of Mike over the course of, until now, regarding that interpretation of the city ordinances, which we respectfully disagree with. We thought then, and we continue to think, that our position is valid in that because of the existing ordinances at the time that we made our application, based on an ordinance 2003-03 and the definitions in place at that time, because we were in C1, because we were eligible for conditional use permit, and because the definition said if you're in C1 eligible for a conditional use permit, and without prejudicing Mike's position, interpretation on this is our interpretation, the definition says then you are not non-conforming. And so we made every effort to persuade the city to allow us to proceed on that basis. And then at the end of the year, the city council passed the new ordinance, and Mike urged us to apply under the new ordinance for a conditional use permit, as to that would be the way to move our project forward. And so that is why we put together this particular application. In the meantime, we may or may not have lost our opportunity to build the log home with Lonnie, depending on what his situation is and what the availability of the logs is and the subs that we had all lined up for the project. So it may or may not end up being a log home, it may end up simply being framed, depending on what's available in the time frame. Because here we are in August already, and so the building season is, in terms of availability of trades and everything else, is uncertain.
But at any rate, the question was whether the structure would be removed in a new building.
If it's a frame structure, there's a possibility of retaining part of what is there, to be straightforward.
Okay.
Right, because the main part of the foundation is going to stay intact. I mean, the foundation itself is going to stay intact, so conceivably the walls that would experience an expansion, in other words, the north and south, because the north side I'm proposing squaring off, I showed you, and the south a modest 6-foot expansion in the footprint. Those walls would have to be removed, but the other walls may remain in place. It just depends on what's available. So what we're asking for is not a building permit. We're asking for a conditional use permit for occupancy as a residence. And once that conditional use permit is in place, we sit down and draw up detailed plans, present them to the city, consistent with the residential occupancy, because it'd be basically a residence, and then we'd go from there. And if there are any restrictions, we comply with restrictions. We don't anticipate asking for any variance. Setbacks are all correct. Everything else is there. It's just a matter of, can we occupy the structure as we have occupied it and make the improvements that allow us to live there for the rest of our natural life, which I feel is probably about 6 months and 3 hours and 2 days. But who knows?
That long,
I'm
You
72,
got it
my
down.
wife is 70, and just move on from there. We want a roof that doesn't leak, and so that means we have to reconfigure the roof to a gable roof.
Okay.
And
So just a question.
so that's what we're at.
That's your understanding of this process too, is that this conditional use permit, that if it's granted, would then allow them to?
No, I don't have any issue with his description of the history of what's occurred. What a conditional use permit will allow them to do is build a specific proposal that they've presented to you, and that proposal has to comply with the
I'm sorry,
R1 standards.
Would allow him to build what? I just had trouble hearing you. Turn your-
Yeah.
your-
Would allow him to build a specific proposal that he has presented to you.
Right, this proposal is what
Yes.
we're
Which,
reviewing.
in order for him to be able to apply for a conditional use permit, needs to comply with the R1 zoning rules. So, this is what you will be able to grant him permission to do with the conditional use permit, what he has submitted to you.
But if we grant the conditional use permit for this proposal, he would then be allowed to come in and receive a land use permit and go ahead and construct that.
That's right.
And utilize it for residential.
Yes.
Beyond this process here tonight, is there any public review of the design of the building?
No.
Is there any public input as to the appearance of the building?
No.
Do we have anything besides the 2 potential plans, neither of which we know for sure is going to be built, anything beyond this of how it's going to look?
No.
The reason I bring this up is because of the incredible visibility of your site and the responsibility that I feel I have to the public to make sure that we do our best here today on this. It makes me a little uneasy to be approving one of 2 directions, actually 2 directions of what we might be able to do here. And because I'm not entirely sure what this is going to look like. If it's not the drawing of a Lonnie style home, we don't know what the other one is. I don't have an exterior on that. And are we doing this as a continued public thing, or what are we doing?
Well, we still have to open it up for
Okay, yeah.
public comment, but these questions are good, and I think that's a valid point to make. I would suggest, though, that what they're asking for is the envelope of the building, not necessarily the exterior or the construction standards of that building, whether it's a log-built or a stick-built building. I don't think that's, something that we as a planning commission have ever taken on in terms of the design or appearance of a structure, other than the the functional
Pretty sure we have.
dimension of that.
I think we have. Whether or not it was appropriate at the time, I'm pretty sure we have. I know I've been put through that ringer with my stuff. And so people are always curious. It's the number one thing the public always asks is how's it going to look? What's it going to look like? And so is this something that we are within our bounds to request? There's two potential paths for this approval to go down. The drawing we see and a drawing we don't see. Should we be asking for both drawings? You know, again, considering the uniqueness of this location and this property.
Well, I guess the question I would have is, do we even have the authority under our ordinance to ask for those architectural or?
The last time I came in for a conditional use permit, I brought blueprints and a model.
You did?
Yeah. And
It wasn't required. But you did bring that in, yes.
It was nice, and there was
I mean,
cake.
John has brought in what I would say a rendering of a home design,
well,
but
that's something we can individually vote on. But I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that Plan B, shall we call it, is sort of undocumented, and other than a footprint.
I have a question. I'm just curious, because I'm trying to, so if he gets this approved today according to the drawings that he's put in, he's got two drawings. Now, can you draw parameters? Those two drawings are two options, and the
I see one drawing.
you see one drawing.
Yeah.
there's only one drawing.
There's
one drive.
And so if this is approved, then it would be subject to the parameters of that specific drawing, depending, and then he could do either a log building or a conventional frame building based on that, those
Yeah.
parameters, right?
Footprint and envelope of that building.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if it's within those, then.
So there's really not, so he can't really do, if he gets his permit, he can't just go and say, I redesigned it, I'm gonna put in a three-story
It's
building.
very,
or
very,
Well, it can't go
very
beyond
specific.
The parameters.
The envelope.
envelope that we-
The envelope.
You know,
And that's
can-
not just the footprint, that's the whole shape and everything.
Yeah.
Now,
Can I make
this,
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Now, when I'm getting, you know, he's been my neighbor, and we've been at it from time to time. But he has, everything he does, he loves that property. And, in his design work that he's done, even on that little shed out there, he thought about it and he put a cedar shingle roof on it. He's gonna do this right. I mean, if he builds this out there, it's gonna look really nice. I mean, I've got people that come by Sydney's all the time, and they look over there and they go, that's like a little fantasy land over there, and it's cute and it's quaint, and he's been very careful to maintain that, and he's thought a lot about it. I remember you thought about that little shed there, and he put way too much thought
Took
into
me
building
2
that
years.
little shed.
It took me 2
But-
years to get
but-
this approval.
But if you look at that shed, and you look at the design work that he put into it, and how it fits, and it's kind of Cape Cod-ish, I don't think he's gonna violate any aesthetic. I think if you let him do what he wants to do with it, it's gonna look nice and probably better than you guys can come up with in the next hour here.
Sure. Bruce, are you going to be able to stick around for the whole meeting here? I know you're really busy. Are you? Can you? 'Cause
What'd you say?
Are you going to be able to stick around a little bit for the
Yeah.
whole meeting? Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask some other questions for you.
Sure, you bet.
And before we move on, can I just open it up for any other public comments too, because
I just, I was on the council for 8 years and on planning for 8 years. And I was part of changing the regulation.
Ron, can you?
Ron,
can you-
Ron.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
sorry.
Okay.
And I was part of, and I think Tina was on there, and I think Evelyn was on there when we changed the ordinance to allow this type of thing, because we thought it was kind of harsh if somebody was grandfathered into, in a business zone with an R1, to not let them do anything with it. And so I support it that way. And then the other thing is, I don't think we ever had a design committee. You go on
Right.
height the regulations that are put on by the building codes. And so, until you establish a design committee, I don't think you'd really want to get into.
Yeah, I've never been in favor of a design committee
Yeah,
myself.
but I mean, that's sort of what, with all due respect, is sort of what it sounds like is being brought up here.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the brevity of this process as we use to cover most of our issues throughout the town, this conditional use permit process. You know, you're notifying people within 300 feet of the property, right? Is it 300 feet?
Yeah, and in the newspaper, but it's a little blurred in the newspaper.
I don't think anyone, it's a valuable location, and I don't mean in dollars, I mean in town personality and character. And I don't really believe this process adequately addresses it. I've always been a fan of these visioning processes. I've now seen 3. And so I have concern about whether or not we're properly addressing the importance of your location. You know, not specific concerns about your ideas, but about whether or not we've opened this up, but we're just going to have to do what we can. And so that's basically, I have other concerns which we'll address as we come to the right points in the process, things I want to talk about. But,
Ron, anything else? No? I mean, Evelyn, would you?
Well, at this point, the question is, will you approve a variance? After they get the variance, then they come in with the building permit,
So conditional.
or I mean, a conditional use. But then they can come in with their, they apply for a building permit, isn't that right?
ask him.
When they come in for a land use permit, that'll be an administrative approval. And there's really enough information in this submittal for us to make a decision about a land use permit.
Okay.
But the requirement to get a land use permit for this type of action is the conditional use permit. So separating those processes really doesn't do either of them justice. You really need to see what is being proposed for the future land use permit in order to make a decision about the conditional use permit. If this gets approved as a conditional use permit, there's no reason to think there's going to be any issues with the administrative approval of a land use permit for this. If all this same material was submitted to our office, we would approve it.
Well, I guess I have another question. Why we're sitting here over a year on the same request? I mean.
This is the first time it's come before the planning
First time
commission.
before the planning.
That's right, but why was it sitting in the city office all this time? I mean,
Could I have,
go ahead.
on Mike's point there, I'm a little puzzled on that, because if you approve the conditional use, you know what you're doing. Then you come with the presentation for a land use permit, and then you say, well, we've approved the condition. You've already put conditions on it that you're going to approve the building when, I mean, that you can approve the design how you want it when it comes before you. So I don't quite get you'd have to have the building approved now before you approve the conditional use.
We don't approve building plans.
No.
We never have,
No,
and
but
we
you
still
know the
don't.
size and you know what it's gonna be. It's gonna be a residential building.
We ask for the dimensional requirements.
So when you
know.
have the conditional use there, it sort of seems like it's either black or white. Either you have a reason not to approve the conditional use, but he's saying, well, we're approving it on what's gonna be there, when he's got it right here, what's gonna be there. I mean,
Well, this is,
yeah.
you know, what he's asking for, and
Yeah.
if he gets approval for this, he can bring that in the form of a land use permit, and it would be approved as far as I can see.
It seemed like this was kind of holding, I mean, the conditional use is holding up the, I guess I didn't understand that. That didn't hit me.
So just want to make sure we've got the public comments, because we're going to cut this off for public comment and turn it over to the planning commission for discussion. So, any of you have anything else that you want to say? Otherwise, we're going to move on with the meeting.
Well, I guess I'd like to say that in all the years I was on the planning board, and I was on for the 8 years I was on the council, I was on for few years before I was on the council. I was on the planning board when I was a mayor, and I have never seen anybody be put through all the hoops and the steps that John and Joanne have been put through, and I don't see any sense in it. And you say you're worried about what it's going to look like. Do you like the building now? I mean, the poor little thing is just worn out. It needs to be redone.
Once it leaves our hands, it's out of our hands.
Well, yeah, and I mean, as far, you know, I didn't think that we had a design team. I didn't think we had city codes as far as that's concerned for
But,
buildings.
you know, and
So I
I've,
don't see how you can sit there and say that it's a concern of yours and to look out for the public's.
I'm trying to make it really clear. I think it's a concern of the communities.
Well, I think the
Yeah.
community is all in favor of having improvements made. And John and Joanne have been here since 2003. I've never seen them do anything that hasn't been done with the utmost of taste and consideration for their neighbors and everybody else.
Well, we can continue to talk about that.
Please do.
And I
Okay,
will.
thank you. With that, we're gonna close the public hearing portion of the meeting. John, did you have one more thing you wanted to say before we?
You know, we really enjoy the site, and we really, as in my discussions with Mike and also with you, expressed our consideration for the importance of the site, and that we wanted to make something that fit into the community. That we wanted to build something that fit into the community on that site, that was consistent with the expectations of both the community and the many visitors that come by there. We didn't want to block off views. We didn't want to have anything that was garish. We wanted something that people would enjoy. I mean, they enjoy coming down there and sitting on our break wall and on the beach and all of that. And we want to keep that. We want to keep that open for people. And so we want to be a good, beneficial part of the community, and we want our property to be improved so that it's that way for years and years and years to come. So.
Okay, thank you. With that, we're going to take it up as a discussion of the planning commission. I mean, I think if we look at the drawing, I don't know which page this is on, but it shows the area where the home,
Is it this one?
this one, yeah, I think that's probably the most relevant in terms of showing
We're talking
where,
an envelope
where,
and,
Got an extra copy.
where the current home would be expanded.
Yeah.
The existing home is the gray shaded area. The additions are all shown, and you would see then the boundaries of the entire structure. And you can relate that to the drawings that have also been included. So the north side of the property is the side facing Sydney's. The entry would be on the street side. So those two small additions, and on this, John, it doesn't give a dimension for those two small additions. It does on one of the other ones, but I don't, the way it's copied, I can't read those.
The one addition to the south is the width of the building, which is approximately 25 feet and 6 feet.
6 feet, okay.
And so that would be an addition. On the other end, it's squared off, and I believe it's, look here. On the squared off end of it, it's going to be about 5 by 7 on one end and 5 and probably 8 and 9. Can you see it on yours, Mike?
Are we talking about this drawing still?
That one there, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but there's not dimensions.
This one doesn't
on
have
that
dimensions on it.
There's another one that does have dimensions, but what we have copied here, I don't think I can, at least I thought there was one that had dimensions.
While we're looking at this, even at these expansions, we're not getting into any violations of residential setbacks.
No,
Not that I can see.
Oh, no,
structure.
Yeah.
the structure
As it's shown.
already is inside of
The
the
old residential
residential setback on the west
And
side.
these additions don't punch into it. I saw something in here where there was a reference to speaking to Mayor Jay, where he said there would not need to be any setbacks. And I didn't know if that was
There
accurate.
would not,
Yeah, I didn't know if that was accurate, because that's true when you have a commercial use.
Yeah.
But when you have a residential use, this is the way it used to be. I don't know if we've changed this. You
Well,
honor the residential setbacks when you have a residential use.
Yeah, the language in the conditional use section is specific about that. It says that you can have a conditional use permit to do improvements to an existing single-family structure that comply with the R1 requirements.
Right.
So,
Okay.
which this house doesn't right now comply with the R1 requirements.
because of
It's
the-
already inside of the setback on the west side.
That was my
So
question.
it would need a variance
No,
also?
it's already inside of the setback, so.
But that the addition on the west side will further
Yeah, he's
reduce-
calling it an entry stair, and there is some ability to extend an entryway into a front yard setback.
So that rough overhang would not be considered part of that?
Now, I think that the way it's drawn here, I think it's just fine as an entry stair, and it's
Okay.
not something that has to comply with the regular 25-foot setback. But as you can see, the house doesn't right now.
Right.
The existing structure doesn't. The one he's proposing is going to be built on that same setback line, so that's not an issue.
And the size of the entry porch or platform or whatever it is, what's the size of that?
It's a 6 foot deep. It's consistent. Right now, I've got a 6 foot deep step arrangement. in the
Okay.
front.
So 6 foot by,
Yeah.
by
By the
what?
width of the building, which is,
Shows it being a little less than the width of the existing building.
yeah, it's cut in on the ends for aesthetic reasons.
Yep.
Call it 20 feet. Yeah, I don't know if there is a drawing that specifically says
Yeah,
what those two
I
squares on
thought I
the
read
north are.
somewhere in here, but
Yeah.
I may not have, I mean, there's a lot of information and I just may have missed that, but,
There was a description in one of the memos, yeah, that talks about what the size of that addition is.
well, you know, I'll just tell you, my personal view is that, you know, this is obviously an existing non-conforming use. It's been there for, you know, a good many years, and, you know, long before the ordinance went into effect, you know, what the owner wants to do is make improvements that would make it more functional, and we don't know whether it's going to be more aesthetic, but, you know, I think with the drawings that he's shown and, you know, the information that he's provided, that certainly lends me to believe it will be a much more aesthetic looking building. The issue of the setback from the street, to me, is not an issue. I mean, the setback well beyond what other businesses, I mean, in that area are. Just because it's a house doesn't seem to make sense to push it back even further, which I think could create even more of an aesthetic, you know, kind of void there in that area. The small additions, I think as long as they're done within the confines of the requirements of the ordinance and done to satisfy the squaring off of the existing structure, I could support that. I mean, I think it's a reasonable use of the property, you know, recognizing that non-conforming uses do exist in the city. You know, we've had conversations about these in the past year, or last couple of years, and, you know, they're not easy situations because they're non-conforming. They don't fit the plan. But obviously, as an owner, John and his wife have made significant investments to the property and want to continue to make investments. I would support their request to place these additions and make the improvements that they've suggested. So that's, I mean, that would be my starting point for conversation.
And Tim, can I jump in on? It seems like you addressed you know, what you were thinking in terms of the porch and then these two little additions. I get that. Like, to me, it's like, okay, that doesn't seem like we're necessarily, you know, making it bigger. But on the other end, on the south side, you're making it bigger.
You're right.
Sure.
Yes.
Clearly. So I'm wondering how, and you feel like that's just, well,
Yeah,
that's just fine.
The lot is certainly plenty big to do that without affecting the setbacks. I mean, there's
Okay.
nothing on that side.
Yeah, I know. That's
There's
why
nothing
I'm
on
like-
that side.
But
of
you
the
didn't
property.
address that, so I just thought you
Yeah.
might have a thought about that.
I just feel like, you know, his proposal is a reasonable way to improve that property and could benefit, you know, everybody in this situation.
I would like to speak to that for a second. Now, we're going to be going through these findings ultimately here.
Yeah.
We're going to have to answer
Yeah.
these 4 questions.
Excuse me, I have a hard time hearing you guys because you don't talk into the mics.
There's no amplification.
These are,
You're not
these are not, these are only for him.
Yeah. What I will say, and for him, is I don't really, there's only a couple things I disagree with Tim on. By and large, I don't have any problem with the architecture. I really don't. I don't think that's the issue here. I think there's some other very important things to talk about, and it's a little uncomfortable, and I'm going to say these things with all due respect. We're going to have to answer 4 questions: that the use conforms with the comprehensive plan. We're going to have to answer that it's compatible with the existing neighborhood. We're going to have to answer that it will not impede the normal orderly development and improvement of the area, and that the location and character of the proposed use is considered to be consistent with a desirable pattern of development for the area. All right, well, we already know we've got this lone artifact from the past, this R1 home in the middle of what is arguably our busiest tourist part of the town. And I have multiple anecdotal evidences, but not enough time to dig them up, of people who have not had positive experiences when sitting on your break wall, when crossing your property. My wife went to a barber or a stylist in Duluth recently, and she said, "Oh, I was just in Grand Marais, I loved it. But we had dinner at Sydney's, and my husband was getting his picture taken, she was taking my picture, and some man came out of a gray house and yelled at us because my foot was on his property." I contacted it's public knowledge, I contacted the sheriff's department, and I asked, well, is there a lot of police calls here? There's been 25 police calls from you to the police department since 2005.
No.
It's public knowledge. And also recently, I recall something coming into the city in which you wanted that parking lot across the street stopped from whatever it was doing. All these things do not add up to what I consider a harmonious use of your property. You want a quiet residential use in a completely unquiet, busy, high-traffic location. Is this kind of tension good for our tourism economy? Are we going to go forward with that? And sorry to bring this up, but it's out there. So I counted 9 different private property signs, most of them on that break wall. I've never heard anyone say they were allowed to sit on that break wall. I'm pretty sure they aren't. Although I'm confused by your statement earlier that you say you like it. I'm pretty sure you don't. But so all that being said, I've said all I can say on the matter. I want peace in the valley. And what I would really like is, and I'm only one vote here, so take it for what it's worth. I try to do my best for Grand Marais all the time, so I understand if people disagree with me. But I would really love if there was some method for you and your property going forward that can try and mediate what might be tension between your lower rated use, whatever we call that, lower impact use, and the high impact that's taking place around you. I want to make sure that people don't have these experiences, and that I'm not here to guard you or protect you, but that you don't feel like you're in a position where you have to be policing the area. And so what can we do at this stage in the game? Can we request that you put in a fence? Can we, what can we do? I just want peace in the valley, and I don't think it's there. So, and I don't want to I'm not making this up. You know, the facts are out there, and I think they can continue to be gathered. And when we put out a notice out 300 feet, let's look at the number of people that visit that location. How many of them actually receive this notice? Not even 1/10 of 1%.
How many actually?
receive a notice that this is going on. Not even 1/10 of 1% of the thousands of tourists who pass through there and may or may not have a positive or negative experience. So I'm not concerned about the architecture. I think what you're doing is low impact and wonderful. And I don't support design panels. I never have. I've been a person who fights against them. I'm more concerned about the character of use and whether you're going to be comfortable there and whether the tourists are going to be comfortable there. So I don't know what you two have been at it about. I don't know.
We've had ins and outs over the years,
Mhm.
and I would say early on, he was very aggressive. I mean, with his expectations of how the neighborhood should be as being a resident in the midst of a commercial area. But I have seen that mediate quite a bit over the years, and I haven't seen the hostility. Well, I don't know how to say it, but recently or in the last years, I think he's, I think there was a learning curve for John living there. And
me too.
and I think that he's gotten it.
Yeah. John, are you spending less time there? I don't know, we're probably not supposed to be interacting with the public. Are you spending less time there now than you were in the early years? Your time spent there about the same?
May I speak, Tim?
Go ahead.
Because I know the public comments.
Yeah, that's all right.
I opened up
I'll
a
let
can
you
of
speak,
worms
because I
earlier.
think
But,
you have been addressed in a lot of comments here.
I'll let my attorney speak.
No, go ahead.
I thought you were a brother.
He is my,
And-
he's also
okay, all right,
one of
okay,
my
all right.
family attorneys.
Okay.
Family's attorneys. At any rate, I have to really challenge, and
I'm Todd Miller.
you're Todd
Yeah.
Miller. Okay, I have to really challenge your statement that there were 25 police calls.
It was going to be my Patalyson this afternoon.
Okay, can I speak without, I didn't interrupt you.
I just want to make sure it's a known fact and it's public
I have to
knowledge.
really challenge that. If I see an illegal activity across the street or on the street, I'll call the police for that reason, period. Because that's my right as a citizen of the United States to report those things. But I'm certainly not a scold, and I'm certainly not a person who looks to get people in trouble. So, and I would guess that over the course of my occupancy on that property, since 2003, I've probably called the police maybe 10 times. It's a highly active area. I've called it for drug deals, etc. When we first occupied the property, first purchased the property, I did make an offer to Mike to pay to have the curb cut, or to have a curb put in, and even to have the lot across the street paved. That was about the time when I stopped in and asked if it would be okay if I gravelled the walkway along the street. About the same time my dearest friend Bruce here took my fence down when he was working on his property. And I had to replace the fence, and you'll remember that one, I'm sure. It's been a long time. But at any rate, and I've always, whenever I wanted to do something.
I think that was Mike's fence, but.
No, well, Mike said it was mine. But at any rate, at any time that I've wanted to do something on that property, I've come in and gotten a permit, period, that's it. Appropriate for fence, for shed, that sort of thing. And so, as far as the use of the property and what we do there, it is our property, right? We do own the riparian rights there because our property is 150 feet deep, which dumps it all out into the lake. Not very much, but it goes into the lake. I have no problem with people walking down the breakball. I have no problem with people walking down the lower beach. I do have problems with people coming up and sitting on the deck that I had there and sitting at my table and reading my newspaper if I happen to go inside in the morning. I do have a problem. I do retain, regardless of where my property sits, I do retain certain rights and privileges for privacy and personal use of that property. So, I realize where it is, and personally I enjoy the traffic. I grew up, the address I grew up was mainly my grandmother's address, 2123 Marshall Street, Northeast Minneapolis. 4 lanes of traffic going by, and when I was a little kid, a streetcar. A bar and a brewery across the street. This is quiet compared to that. I'm grown up in the city, but this is our second home, and we hope that at some point it'll be our retirement home. Now, and so I'm a responsible property owner. We want to live in it, like I said, as a residence. We want it to be our residence. The other option has got to be commercial. We don't want to make it commercial, because to make it commercial, to make it pay, you have to take full advantage of the property. And it's an inappropriate site for 30 feet and lot line to lot line. That's not right. You know, that changes the whole character of everything. We want it consistent with the character of the neighborhood. We want it consistent with the great job Bruce has done next door. I have no problem with Bruce having his business next door at all. I love it. I love the music.
It's been better. I mean, it's been good the last 5 years.
His music has been better. His music has been better in the last 5 years. So, but you know, so that's I mean, that's the way it is. But I think I'm really troubled by your characterizations of us and our occupancy. I find that offensive and completely out of order for this sort of a situation. What you're looking at is applying the ordinances. And what do the ordinances say? You know, and the requirements here. I mean, if somebody came in with a house, with a single plan for a house that was framed, you wouldn't say, well, you got to have aluminum siding. You wouldn't say no, that you got to have vinyl siding or anything like that. You know,
I think getting back to
so, but I appreciate your input, and I'll take it to heart. But like my wife says, I can be a better person.
Okay, I'm still, okay, I appreciate your response. I'm still in my statement here. You're perfectly welcome to get the same report I got from the Sheriff's Department. It is 25 calls. The next point of that is those calls are broken down as to what the nature of the calls were complaints about. Many of them were noise, not drugs. And there were drug reports that you have in there. There was others, but a lot of it's noise, which you're in the noisiest part of town, you're gonna hear everything. And so, but whether it was his noise, I don't know, you know, I don't know what noise it is. It could be just kids screaming and shouting and having fun in the parking lot as they've done there for generations. So I want to point that out. And the reason I bring this up is we're going to go over these findings, these 4 findings, and they're going to address whether there's harmony and compatibility there. And I want there to be. I want there to be. And if there's anything we can do to address that here, I'd be happy to approve this. But if we're not going to address it at all, I'm going to have a problem with it. So go ahead.
I think, you know, being the guy next door.
Excuse me, we're going to continue on with the planning commission discussion. We're never going to get out of here tonight if we keep going around in circles, so.
And I mean, I guess, you know, just on what Todd was saying, I mean, that is just part of the non-conforming use. I mean, you are somewhere where there aren't a lot of houses. And so it is going to be like that. But I would also say that it does seem like what you're asking to do or proposing to do with what the structure you got there doesn't strike me as unreasonable at all. You know, we are expanding the nonconformity, and that is some concern. But again, like we were looking at, it's really on the south side that we're seeing that sort of real expansion happening. So I don't know. I'm not so sure.
Is there a way, I don't want to be offensive, I want to work with you on this. Is there a way that we can receive some sort of commitments, or how is it going to be handled? I feel that like the sole appointed community representative to make sure there's peace down there, within whatever rights we have to ask for it. And is there a way to make it clear for tourists about where they're welcome and where they aren't? Anyone who walks into your place and reads your newspaper is obviously entirely out of line and probably crazy.
I've had people stand in front of my window in the front yard.
Yeah. Well, this will be.
Watch me eat breakfast.
Yeah, this will be part of the.
Fine.
Yeah, this will be part of the problem.
I don't spill a lot.
Yeah, they just think it's commercial space and that there's probably a business that's supposed to be looking in the window. It's confusing because of the changing nature of Grand Marais. And I hate to be the person suggesting fences, but I'd suggest one. You know, and that way, no one's going to make that mistake. And I actually think, you know, there's no sense saying that, you know, good fences make for good neighbors. And I do think there's public confusion down there. Is there any possibility of just putting up a little fence?
Well, can I?
You know, as you're speaking as.
I got to turn.
Go ahead, I mean,
I'm just asking for clarification as to what it is that you're looking for as far as a fence. are you talking about like a little picket fence or rail fence in the front yard? Are you talking about something delineating back to the break wall? I mean, what is it that you're,
You had mentioned
talking about? There is a fence
Yeah, you had mentioned that you have.
currently on the north side of the property.
Okay, yeah, I'm not too familiar with that one. I don't know if that one causes contention, does it? Well, that'd be more about you. Anyway, you had mentioned you have riparian rights all the way down
Told
to
you how beautiful it was.
okay. You have riparian rights all the way down to the water. So am I to understand correctly that anyone walking on the beach is doing so by your permission?
Absolutely.
Okay, so people shouldn't be
I
able to
tell
walk along
people
that
that.
beach without your permission, but people do all the time.
Well,
Well, that's,
if I may,
that's just to
if I may,
make it clear,
Okay,
that's the nature of
that's the nature
almost
of the
every
property.
property,
right, understood.
other than at
Right,
the end of the
right.
streets.
But there's a line at which once they cross it, you're uncomfortable, and that makes perfect sense.
If they're inside the break wall, I get a little bit
Okay.
uncomfortable.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
Today I had a couple walking up to my patio door, and they were saying, well,
yeah.
we were just wanted to get out,
In
which
the-
is fine. And I have a sign on the edge of my property, where the trail starts off the edge of my property
Mm-hmm.
on the south side, a sign that says beach and an arrow that I put up. And on the beach side, I have another one that says road, to help people, and I've maintained a path so pedestrians can go that way.
Okay.
And I have,
So right now the dividing line is pretty much the break wall, where if people are inside of it, not so happy.
well, it's,
So Todd, can
I
we
like-
confine the conversations between ourselves, because I think
Okay.
if we have this dialogue,
I-
we're just
this is your
not gonna.
meeting, and-
Yeah, and I got another meeting at 5, so.
Good.
Okay. Well, I'll open up to you guys. What do you think of the idea of? I'm concerned when we start answering these questions. The points I brought up are going to be hovering there in the air, and we're going to have to talk about them. But any thought about this idea of kind of a tourist guiding fence so that we don't end up with these interactions?
I mean, I think that's something we can make as a general request, but I don't know that that's part of what we're doing here, is something that we could require. I mean, or at least I don't see where we would have the ability to say like, hey, you gotta have a fence.
Well, I mean, it could be in a sense that, this is a non-conforming use adjacent to conforming uses, and in order to separate those
To
and
make that clear.
give some clear,
Okay.
definitive separation,
Yeah.
would a fence help achieve that separation and do some of the things that you've suggested? And I don't disagree that non-conforming use there have been some problems and issues in the past over the relationship between the owner and the neighbor and others. But I'm not sure that dealing with it as a non-conforming use, as a conditional use request, that becomes the paramount issue in my mind. I mean, it would be nice, yes, as you say, to make peace in the valley, because certainly what we do, we don't want to continue or to create a future problem by allowing this. And my view is that what's already there is the use, and it's the use that's creating the conflict, not whether it's this use or this dimensional use or the existing dimensional use. That's not what's creating the problem. It's the fact that it exists there in an area where there's a high density of people, lots of activity, and and clearly it's a non-conforming use, and that's why these are challenges. We spent how many meetings talking about non-conforming uses, trying to figure out how to deal with the few isolated instances of non-conforming uses that have taken up a huge amount of our time because they're very complicated. How we deal with this is no different than how we've dealt with some of the other requests when we've had those before us. Challenging.
So can I follow on? So then making a request like a fence is not crazy, or that's not outside of the bounds?
I would say it's not outside of our authority to help address those concerns and those findings that we have to make
All right then, what other issues do we have here, before we move on to the findings? I don't know, I don't know how much further to pursue that. I don't know how, I mean, I threw a fence idea out there, but I don't,
No,
we do, it's only gonna get noisier down there.
Sure.
You
I mean,
know, it's only-
you know, I feel like it's a, you know, a legitimate way to do it. I mean, something that just makes clear that that's where the property is, that's where the change is.
I have to interject something, sorry, because it's
Sure.
historical, not related to this. He went in for a fence variance. I think he went in. Did you
Well,
say anything?
I know Mike suggested I needed a variance, and I went before the city council on that particular issue, and there was no variance required. They didn't allow for a variance, I just got the permit from you for the fence. That's it.
And we didn't want a fence because we felt like in the commercial use of that property, one of the things is that vista of the
Artist
point,
Point.
Artist Point there, which is, you know, what people look at. And so.
When you say we didn't want a fence, you
Uh,
mean Sydney's?
Sydney's didn't want a
Okay,
fence, and the Stan Pool, when he was there, didn't want a fence either, because that was his office there.
Are you talking about like a pretty substantial fence?
Right,
Yeah, okay.
so we had talked about, I had maintained for a while a rope fence across.
Down
for-
from the corner of your building down to the beach, but that
Right.
washed away.
But yeah, the storm took it.
Washed into my yard, and it's still laying there, Bruce.
It's beautiful, it's like a relic. But anyway, it was really nautical. Anyway, so we tried to do it in such a way as it was pleasing and denoted our, because we'd had troubles there before with what you're saying, the difference in use, and people intuit that that's a commercial area because it's in a commercial area, so that's the way they look at it, and that's why people walk over there and they look in your
Yeah.
window, they're
Yeah.
like, hey, is this some kind of interpretive
Is this a museum?
shack, you know,
Yeah.
things like that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think getting back to our conversation, thank you, Bruce, appreciate that, but getting back to our conversations, I mean, I think that when we start to talk about, you know, issues like complaints and disagreements between neighbors,
Tours.
well, anybody, I mean, neighbor can be a broad classification, but I mean, this happens, it happens all the time. I mean, we hear, I mean, I hear complaints about noise downtown from people that live up in the residential district that don't like the music
Oh,
that's
sure.
playing at
Yeah,
night.
yeah.
You know, I mean, it's allowed by ordinance, it's permitted, you know, but it doesn't stop the people from being upset or having a complaint and lodging that complaint. Continues, you know, I mean, it's been going on for years, complaints still coming.
I have a suggestion. We can either sit there and say, we want a fence, or we can ask you to come up with a plan that addresses it. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, we can't talk just yet, but we can suggest that the applicant make a plan for mitigating potential disagreements, or clarifying the
You
property
know,
boundaries.
I think that's totally unrealistic, because how do you mitigate
I just want to
a
give the freedom to them to
problem
design.
problem that you don't know, that we don't know exists?
I know it exists,
You know what exists.
that there's an encroachment problem on his property and he's uncomfortable.
I'm sorry,
But
you said-
that would be no different than anybody else that had private property feeling that they didn't want people to be encroaching on that.
It's different because the uniqueness of the property is very different. Yeah, that
Well, it's not
location-
really, I mean, if somebody else posted their property and
Somebody else
said,
with non-conforming property?
wouldn't make any difference if it's non-conforming, does it?
Well, we can disagree on that.
I mean, I just think
think it does,
if you're saying that you want peace in the valley, if you want the neighbors and everybody to be understanding, if somebody else downtown puts up a no trespassing sign, private property, whatever, for whatever purpose or reason they want to do that, they have the right to do that. And would that create conflicts and problems? Yes, it would. I think it would, because people have a general attitude that things are open and available and.
Especially right there.
I'm not sure that we can identify what those problems might be and ask that the applicant provide a solution to those problems.
Well, it is a problem. And we can choose not to address it, if you wish. I'm addressing it.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
So but I'm not sure, other than putting up a fence between two existing properties, what we can do beyond that, that would,
Yeah, I'm not really hooked on any particular idea, but I just thought the first thing that came to my mind, you know, I keep seeing this small picket fence, doesn't block views. People stepping over a fence got to be a little nuts, you know, and so I think that would prevent potential negative experiences and conflicts. And so I like it. I don't know on a board what we're supposed to be doing here if we can't make suggestions like that.
we can. I mean, I think that's what I was trying to say, is that we have the ability through the conditional use process to try to mitigate those concerns that we have through requiring different actions to be
Right.
taken.
But I'd like to see the plan for the fence, you know, before it's done, you know, and, you know, in case this fence is going all the way to the water line, then, you know, all of a sudden we got a different problem. So, you know, this has to be something we work together on, so.
So you're suggesting that we delay making a decision based on the need to see a fence proposal that...
If we can get a drawing on the fence, how quickly can we get back together? That'd be my question.
72 hours.
So it wouldn't have to be too big of a delay. Shouldn't change plans. Vote on it. If we don't clear, we don't clear. I do appreciate you giving it careful consideration.
I guess I would be more willing to offer broad guidelines to what kind of fence we would expect and where that would be located, and give them the choice of how they wanted to construct that fence and what that appearance might look like. I mean, what,
So you mean broad, like 4 foot and that kind of thing?
no higher than
Whatever.
3 foot.
Okay.
You know, because I think one of the issues I would have was if you put up an 8-foot privacy fence,
Right.
all of a sudden you have a wall downtown, which
Yeah, no, we can't have that. No, we can't
creates
have our
creates a
instruction
bigger-
backfiring on us out of
a bigger
fences.
problem than
Yeah.
what you might be
No, I
solving.
think we have to be careful with the fence recommendation because it can be used as permission to do something that's not appealing. And so we have to be careful with
Appealing,
that.
I mean, that gets dicey when we start getting to appealing.
Right, but we can, again, it's like the building, you set limits, you just set general limits.
I think that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
3 feet and-
Yeah.
Could we just make an insertion just here, just real briefly?
Go ahead.
A split rail fence on the north and south sides, approximately on the property line. So it would be perhaps this high, not impede anybody's views, but define the property edge. I do not think it would be a good idea to extend that fence
Past the break wall.
beyond the break wall. It would
No,
go to the
no.
break wall.
I don't think it would
Because I
last
do not
long.
want to impede the traffic on the beach,
Right.
and there's no point in it wash away anyways. And we'd be very happy to do that, and we'd be very happy to do that across the front of the property, but it would be something that I would work out with Mike.
Do
You know, just to make sure it's consistent with the city ordinances and placement,
I'm-
because just a fence can be
Yeah,
6 feet.
no, I'm
as
thankful
far as
that
I
you're,
know.
thankful you're addressing this. Where do you get most of your encroachment from? The beach side, I would think.
It can come any direction. you know.
Okay.
You know,
So-
and I had a fence, just an open rail divider, going north and south, parallel to the long axis of the house. So it would be run north and south on either side of the house before, and it just slows down people from walking through. And I really, you know, I have people who come in and want to, and use my bathroom.
Yeah,
That come by,
okay.
and I have
Well,
no
let's-
problem with it, you know, the
I
old
would.
lady comes by, she's gotta go to the bathroom, what the heck are you gonna do, right?
Let's, so, the one on the lakeside by the break wall, let's assume we're going forward with this. How close to the break wall would you go?
Well, I would probably start out right there, you know?
There'll be room for people to sit on the break wall, that's what.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I
so
never-
something just
I don't-
aft of it, you know.
The only time I ever ask people to leave the break wall is if they're throwing garbage,
Hmm.
either on the beach or in the yard, you
Hmm.
know?
Mhm.
That's it.
Yeah.
But, so,
Okay, so, I'm sorry.
I have no, you know, I think that's, I'm surprised, but I don't find it a problem to stipulate that the boundaries would be clearly marked with a fence that's consistent with the aesthetics of the area. Because if you just say a fence, I mean, somebody could
Yeah,
come in
yeah.
and put up a 6-foot fence, and that would be crazy.
Okay.
You don't want that. You want people to be able to see.
And I don't want to impact Bruce's view.
Yeah.
Is what he described, okay?
Well, yeah, you know, I guess, you know, to be specific, like, the way the property line goes, it kind of, it's not intuitive because it kind of cuts across the view of Sydney's to the lake. And that's, because his property kind of, the way the properties present, they look like they're aiming down to the beach, and actually they're kind of skewed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would, you know, if he was gonna follow that property line, to me, I wouldn't like it ideally.
Bruce's people sit on the beach there on my property above the break wall. I have no problem with that.
And
They do it all the time, that's okay. And it's,
So
so
I
I
would-
wouldn't want to impede that. He did have a rope, you know, like a nautical sort of thing. That was great, but, you know, in the storm it washed away. Should go back, I have no problem with any of that stuff.
So what I would like, what I would think would be a really good solution would be clear, because even when I had that nautical rope,
Yeah.
there, people were like, it just didn't look intuitively correct, so
Yeah.
they would walk around it. So if we built a fence from where your other fence ends,
Yeah.
to the corner of the break wall,
That would impede the flow of people, and I would be happy to do it. I have
Because-
no problem with that.
because then that would keep everybody from walking, they'd have to go over the fence to get onto your lower property where you don't want people.
Well,
on
you know,
the-
it's a unique place because people will eat at Bruce's and they'll sit on that back patio and then they'll cut the corner, which is fine, and go down on the beach. I have no problem with
Okay.
that. But
Just
it's.
to bring it back over here, I just wanted to hear his point too. Should we set the parameters and then just have him, whatever you design, to get back to Mike with it? And then, you know, it sounds like there might be a corner rounding issue, which might be beneficial, but you guys would probably be the ones to decide that.
It's a neighbor to neighbor thing.
Maybe as long as it doesn't exceed, you know, beyond the break wall we talked about in the north-south boundaries. Maybe you guys can talk about rounding it. I don't know.
Well, and there's two other steps in this process. The other is, once we take action, it still has to go to the city council.
Right.
And the city council could take additional action, or they could confirm a plan that might be submitted, along with the land use permit that has to be obtained.
So we just request that they bring the fence plan to the city council.
That could be an appropriate,
That sounds reasonable.
request, and
Yeah.
that way it wouldn't slow the process down, and
Well, it would have to be submitted
Yeah.
pretty quickly to not slow the process down.
When's city council meet?
Next
week.
Wednesday.
Next
We'll be submitting materials to them on Friday.
Yeah.
So if you had a drawing in my office tomorrow, then nothing would be slowed down.
So if it was a split, it wouldn't even have to be a
That doesn't
drawing.
seem
Just a
completely.
description of a split rail fence
Yeah.
that
I would-
didn't exceed
you know,
X number of,
Verbally, on the south side, what I would propose would be just a rail fence, so it's low but it marks, and it doesn't impede anybody's view. I think, I don't think that you want something that says a fence in the conditional use permit, but a specific thing, the rail, because I would hate to have somebody, me get hit by a truck, the conditional use permit goes with the property. Speaking as a general citizen of the community, you'd hate to have somebody have the right to put up a 6-foot board fence.
that's right.
That would not be good.
You already do have the right to put up a
I know, I
6-foot
do already.
fence, so you're not
And I've
actually
never
affecting
done that.
But we don't want the 6-foot,
Yeah,
fence.
nobody
we want
wants
to-
that.
no,
You
are we
know,
within
we
our
want it
boundaries to
open,
limit it?
and,
We
you know,
are. I think we are.
so,
So can you show on the survey drawing when you bring that information in to Mike?
Oh, sure,
Where that
yeah.
fence
I
would be
mean, you can
located
just
with the
draw it in right
descriptor
now,
of?
Right now.
No,
You can just sketch it
No.
in right now, as far as I'm concerned.
no.
Just,
Okay,
Make sure
so,
it's consistent with.
I would just ask that you guys make sure you're both happy, and then make sure it's to their materials by Friday. Something drawn on
tomorrow,
the paper.
tomorrow,
Yeah. If it's possible, sorry.
by the end of the day tomorrow.
Come up with something cool.
Okay. So, back to the planning commission again, you know, we need to,
Let's do the findings. We need a motion first, though, and then findings.
It doesn't matter.
Let's do the findings. Then.
okay. And these are probably gonna be a little more challenging, again, because we're dealing with a non-conforming use, because, you know, recognizing that the use is not consistent with what the plan really calls for, you know, it will be a little more challenging. So, the use conforms to the land or use or comprehensive plan of the city. And clearly, this is a non-conforming use, but the recognition is that for needs to expand or get a conditional use permit to increase their,
So just clarifying, sorry, on that first point, we're saying it doesn't conform to the comprehensive plan, but nonconformities do.
non-conformities.
This is the way we interpret that line.
Well, that's how I would suggest that is dealt with, because clearly it does not conform.
I included in your packet the nonconformities language.
Right.
This is in our land use plan, our zoning ordinance, which is really it's our land use plan.
Mhm.
You're not going to find language in the comprehensive plan that talks about,
This one, page 9.
expanding or continuing nonconformities. But since it says land use or comprehensive plan, you do have an opportunity to look at our nonconformities ordinance and decide whether it's consistent with that.
Is the nonconformities ordinance in here too?
Yes.
Right.
Well, technically, is R1 use permitted use, or a conditional use permit use?
So what the conditional uses in the downtown waterfront district actually say is improvements to and restoration of existing single and multiple family dwellings as regulated in the R1 section. So the nonconformities ordinance says you can expand a nonconformity if it is a conditional use permit. That's one of the conditional uses that's allowed. So an improvement to an existing structure is one of the conditional uses that's allowed. So the non-conforming ordinance would allow that expansion.
Okay, so I think we have satisfied that finding. The second is the use is compatible with the existing neighborhood. You know, I mean, again, it's a non-conforming use. Compatibility is, you know, kind of a stretch in terms of how do you relate the non-conforming use to uses that are allowed by right in that particular area. And already that structure, that home, that use exists there and has for years. You know, when you say compatible, it exists there. I mean, it's
I'll address that too. I would say that there's some historical evidence that there's been some incompatibility. But I would say that the fence mediates that. That would be my hope. And that's basically it.
Okay, could add that too. Then 3, that the use would not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement in the surrounding area of uses permitted by right in the zone district. The uses, I mean, Bruce obviously built his restaurant adjacent to this non-conforming use. It didn't impede that development of
Yeah, I don't see it.
that property. And of
Right.
course, the property to the south is public land.
No, I don't believe the
So-
use will impede development.
And-
Continuation
Yeah.
of the non-conforming.
Yep. So then 4, that the location and character of the proposed use is considered to be consistent with a desirable pattern of development for the area. And again, we have to go back to the non-conforming language because that's the only way that this type of activity. I mean, it's no different than Betsy Bowen's studio in the midst of a R1 zone district can be made to be compatible. It's an existence that already is there. Yes, the uses and activities are not the same as the neighboring uses, but in fact seem to fit and work and function, with the exception of those occasional conflicts.
Yeah.
And I think we hear that with every non-conforming use almost, that those conflicts, people are aware of them.
Yeah.
Whether it's parking or noise or anything.
And I would just point you to, again, the nonconformities ordinance. What we've said is desirable pattern is the purpose and intent section of that ordinance. And it really points, as these usually do, in more than one direction. Because you both want to allow nonconforming structures to exist and be put to reasonable use.
Mhm.
But you also want to diminish the impacts on adjacent properties and limit the expansion of them. So,
Yeah. And we're clearly expanding.
So with that, I would make the motion that we approve the request for this conditional use permit based on the plans that have been submitted for the envelope of the building, not the necessarily the appearance of the building and the construction of the building, and with the findings we made, with the one condition that a fence be installed along the north and south property lines.
And east. Basically, I think we're talking all
East.
four.
I thought all four.
All four. Anywhere you can be encroached from, you say you come from anywhere. That's what's all four. Definitely, we were talking about all four.
Maybe not.
Inside the break wall, is what we're talking about.
Okay, I guess I'm not so certain that
Let's
that's what
clarify
we're
this.
talking about. Let's clarify this a little bit.
Yeah,
'Cause
because I guess
I was thinking that people
kinda
are
like a drawing.
encroaching on it from both sides, not necessarily from the street walking through the property, because the home is there, and you
Yeah.
clearly see that that's a home walking through somebody's yard.
Well, let's not guess. Where are they coming from?
Primarily from the south,
The wooded area?
well, from the beach side of the south.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And some from Bruce's, but I let Bruce's people go through. I mean,
Right.
that's good neighbor. I am a good neighbor.
I could have, what did we think we were talking about? Four sides?
I thought you were talking about, we didn't want to impede or negatively impact the views, to the beach and all that, and I would think a fence along the break wall would cause a problem. And,
Just consider that once people
but
park
from
their
the,
butts up there, then
from
they
the
roll
break
backwards.
wall to the road, or to the front of the property, I wouldn't go to the road, although my property runs out that way. But the existing fence on the north side and an extension that I work out with Bruce, which would either be a rail fence, probably that is what he indicated, an open rail, split rail fence going down just to divide that edge.
And define that
But
edge down to the break wall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it doesn't go to the break wall, it goes to the line of the break wall. Because the break wall, when Hal built the break wall,
It doesn't go to the
he
property.
didn't run it all the way. So
Yeah, see, that's
it
the
goes
problem here,
to,
is that the break wall
it
ends
follows the fence
here,
line on the
property
north
line
side.
is way over
And
here.
what Bruce,
So
we
Bruce
put
is saying
in
people
was
come across here, and they're
a
on
thick,
John's property.
nautical
Yeah, but we
road
needed
that he
something
had
like
looped
that.
between some posts that wash
It'll never last
down.
down here.
And it would allow his customers, his people to walk through.
See, the
And that's a
break wall
minimal
kinda
impact.
turns.
And it cut the corner, which is natural. And I don't think you'd want to run a rail fence all the way down to the line of the break wall. That would not.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just telling Todd.
It would be sort of like out in the middle of nowhere.
So.
But is
where-
this gonna solve the problem?
Where the break wall turns, on that angle, I mean, that seems to be the area that encroaches, where people coming into
But I have
that.
to, I'll have to at some point restore that turn because it washed out in the last storm. Hal did a lousy job there. But at any rate, they walk up that way and go and sit on the break wall. That's not an issue. The south side all the way, and visually that blocks the traffic, because people stop, they would see that fence. But the main impact is people coming from the south upward.
I'm just gonna bring it over.
And-
Just have him
Yeah,
tell what he wants.
yeah, I'd like to see that myself, just what you're suggesting there, right?
May I grab your pen? Thank you. Draw in there what you think will work.
So, I mean, actually, I think all you would actually need it would be on the south side.
It
That
would
would
work,
stop it.
it would go from here, let me see. To the break wall, right here is the break wall point, to there. And then on this side, Bruce's property, the corner is right about, he extended that, didn't he? How far did he extend on that patio in that addition? So he's probably somewhere right around here. And what he had in was a rope fence that went down to right about here, so. But, you know, the kids would go under and over, and they'd walk out here and walk on the break wall. Everybody wants to walk down the break wall, I have no problem with
Yeah,
that.
I don't want to
Yeah.
break in.
What I get upset with is when they sit on the break wall and throw their garbage either up or down onto the beach. And, you know, I say, you can't do that. You know, like, last week when I was here, some people sitting on the break wall, and the guy took out his bridge, put it down on the break wall, and left it there, his dental bridge. So I had to go out, write a note, tape it down, don't take this unless it is yours. You know, you're running all kinds of stuff, but that's life in the city, you know?
I don't think about it, if you just had a split rail fence on this side, that would actually do the impeding of the traffic, and, because people would see it coming from here.
Yeah.
And it would basically stop people coming from the south, which is where the problem is.
Well, personally, I think you need more, but,
But
because
I'm just
we
saying-
have to prevent the
But-
negative interactions.
Yeah, but this thing here, going across the break wall, I don't think that,
So
aesthetically, that would.
You're
work.
not seeing the traffic coming up that way, you're
Yeah,
just seeing it
people
coming over.
don't come up over the break wall, or go down.
Back in business here.
Good luck.
But as far as a split rail fence, what I think John is essentially saying is whatever the neighbor wants and whatever the,
So are
You know,
you
so you
suggesting
guys
anything
are-
on the north
are
side?
willing to
You've
do
got a
that.
fence here already.
Yeah, on the north side, yeah, I've got an existing fence that goes
Right.
down to about here,
Yep.
and, you know, Bruce and I
Sorry,
kinda
but
like the
your pen just
rope
went-
thing in
Yeah.
there, it's just sort of a definition.
Okay.
Unless the kids go over,
We'll need that pen back, I think I.
oh, is that your pen?
It's
That's
his.
my pen.
Yeah.
So
Nice pen, thank you.
with that understanding that that's the area that Bruce's fence suffered storm damage and was,
Yeah,
first storm,
it was gone.
It's gone.
And the remnant washed up in my yard, and Bruce has to pick it up.
Yeah, that's why we don't allow structures in the shoreline setback area.
Yeah, it's not even in the setback area, I don't think it's well back from that, but still, it's.
Well, that fence, the vegetation line for Bruce's property is pretty close to Bruce's building.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You're still going to submit a map with this more definitive to Mike tomorrow.
Well, that was the plan before we discovered that everybody had a different idea of what it was supposed to show.
Well, here, you see,
Yeah,
Michael.
I think I would
So the whole, basically the whole south side.
Yeah.
From the curb line out down to the, well, you showing it past the break wall? Past the break wall, John? On the south side?
No, not the
No,
pass,
no.
up to.
Yeah.
Just up to the
He's got a
break
way
wall.
down here. This is the break wall here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the shoreline.
Yeah.
Here's the break wall,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
And
so
then,
this point.
and you know, Bruce's line is here, so it's way off, and the break wall takes a turn here.
Right. And
There's
his-
that washout
and
issues down here.
John's fence already exists out to
And that
about
one's
here.
surviving? That
Yes.
one's living, it's
Yes.
not getting washed away?
Yes. And what Bruce had done is put this rope fence in that went from here to down
Right.
to about here.
And that didn't
that's
last.
what
Yeah.
got washed out in the first storm, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think it's feasible. I mean, I want there to be a fence on the lakeside, but I don't think it's feasible because it won't last, unless it's back a ways.
Well, it'd have to be above the break wall.
Well, it'd have to be, even that, you know, is that safe? But I would love to see a short fence along the break wall, just to prevent people from accidentally wandering and picnicking in your front yard. Behavior, otherwise, I don't think they should be there, you know? And so it'd be nice if that were clear to them. And the only reason it needs to be made clear to them is because you have a non-conforming use. It's an unusual private property there. If it were
Would
commercial,
you,
really,
would you see a problem, John, putting that same kind of split rail fence along or just behind the break wall so that, I mean,
Expense-wise, it's nothing. Durability, it's a problem. Because I get waves that come over all the time, and it'll wash out right away. In November, it'd be gone. But, and the other thing is aesthetically, I'm trying to follow what comprehensive plan wants and the vision and everything. You want it open, an open site. Now, fences running east and west don't impede the view that people anticipate. Fences running north and south do. A definition of like a rail fence in the front may be adequate, I don't know. But what I did before is I had, just to define the ends of the house, running north and south, running off each corner of the house, I did have a section of rail fence there. And that works great, and maybe just there. And if it comes back that there's an issue, I'd come in and talk to Mike and say, Mike, do you think we should put one there? I don't want to, in no way do I want to make something that isn't aesthetically appealing or impedes that flow of traffic along the beach for two reasons. I don't think it's part of the city, what people expect of the city. That's very necessary that people have the free flow of movement along the beach. I want to maintain that. And I don't think I want the aesthetics of the whole property to be nice,
so with that,
Brick wall itself, delineate.
maybe the best way to approach this would be to give John, the night to think about this. Tomorrow he can submit this plan, that'll go to the council. The council will have to take a look at it and decide if this is an appropriate or acceptable plan to mitigate these concerns that we've raised. And that way we don't have to keep going through the iterations of how this could happen and what.
So if he comes up with a drawing,
He would have to get that
bring
to
it
Mike
into Mike
tomorrow
tomorrow,
to get on the
It goes
council
to city
agenda
council.
next week.
you guys meet.
Mhm.
Okay, then are you going to rephrase your motion?
Can you read the motion as it is right now?
As it is right now, it's based on submitted plans for the envelope of the buildings with one condition, a fence being constructed.
Yeah, so let's just call that a plan for a fence designed to mitigate the concerns raised as presented to the council for their consideration.
Right. And now the council just need to make sure they've heard the concerns.
I think they'll have heard him.
You have.
They normally receive a summary of the public hearing and meeting, which you're welcome to look at.
Condition, a fence being constructed.
All right,
mitigate
any
the
further
concerns were-
discussion?
There's no second yet,
No.
I second.
did you?
Who did?
I
Michael?
So, motion's been made and seconded. There's no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion, vote aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. So, if this, if you get the plan for the fence tonight, and we have this for the council meeting next Wednesday at 6:30, you'll be on the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
One and all.